Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today it is Poetry Thursday, so I wanted to talk about some poetry of interest, and it is still Black History Month as the time that I am speaking, so I wanted to highlight a Black poet that I found and was similarly interesting. And today's poem is all about the Midwest. I am referring to Ode to the Midwest by Kevin Young. For those who don't know, Kevin Young is an American poet, a Black American poet. He has been getting his work published since the 90s, I would say. And he's written a number of books of poetry, some anthologies, maybe done a little editing. And he's also won a number of awards or been nominated for a number of awards for his work. Pretty accomplished writer at this point in his career. Don't know too much else about him, but he is a pretty cool poet, so I definitely recommend that you go and seek out his work, which is more than just what I'm talking about today. And so without further ado, let's talk about Ode to the Midwest. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. The poem begins with some lines from Bob Dylan. The country I come from is called the Midwest. Ode to the Midwest. I want to be doused and cheesed and fried. I want to wander the aisles, my heart's supermarket stocked high as cholesterol. I want to die wearing a sweatsuit. I want to live forever in a Christmas sweater, a teddy bear nursing off the front. I want to write a check in the express lane. I want to scrape my driveway clean myself early before anyone's awake. That'll put 'em to shame. I want to see what the sun sees before it tells the snow to go. I want to be the only Black person I know. I want to throw out my back and not complain about it. I want to drive 2 blocks. Why walk? I want love and stuff. I want to cut my sutures myself. I want to jog down to the river and make it my bed. I want to walk its muddy banks and make me a withdrawal. I tried jumping in, found it frozen. I'll go home, I guess, to my rooms where the moon changes and shines like television. So that was Ode to the Midwest. In terms of narrative, there's not really a strict narrative to this poem. It's just the narrator talking about Midwest things, but I would argue some stereotypical Midwest things. Maybe not entirely not entirely authentic, I would say, because it says I want to be doused and cheesed, referring to the idea that Midwesterners, they eat a lot of heavy cheese type foods, fried foods, which is a little bit true, but not always the case. I want to write a check in the express lane. That seems to happen everywhere, though. I want to be the only Black person I know, which feels like a very important line in this poem, coming from a Black man who wrote it. But growing up in the Midwest, I can tell you, you don't see a lot of people of color in general. Unless you go to the bigger cities and the smaller towns, it's predominantly white, which is to a disadvantage to those cities, because if you live amongst those people all your life, you don't really experience much of the world, and you come to have maybe false perceptions, as I saw in the Midwest. I even had those false perceptions until I went off to college, and then I left Iowa, where I grew up, and saw most of the world. That just feels like a very important line right there, and it seems to come at like the midpoint of the poem, so kind of a symmetry, perhaps. But they go on to talk more, like I want to drive 2 blocks. Why walk? I want to jog down to the river and make it my bed, and then I'll go home, I guess, to my rooms where the moon changes and shines like television, possibly referring to the fact that there's not a lot of ambient light in rural areas, so the moon and the stars are very bright. I don't quite know what Kevin Young is necessarily trying to say with these stereotypes. Maybe he's just trying to evoke a sense of humor about this, but relying on these stereotypes of the Midwest it doesn't feel like he's being authentic about this. Like it's supposed to evoke a nostalgia or a sense of coziness of small towns, but it also doesn't feel authentic because you're leaning heavily on those stereotypes. And I don't think someone who reportedly is as talented and accomplished as Kevin Young would rely on these types of stereotypes in this way. But I could be wrong. This could just be going for the low-hanging fruit of it all. Another interesting aspect of the poem is the use of wordplay. The narrator says, I want to jog down to the river and make it my bed. And then I tried jumping in, I want to walk its muddy banks and make me a withdrawal. So sort of making jokes about using wordplay of rivers. Like you walk its muddy banks and make a withdrawal. Like banks withdrawal. And rivers have river banks. And then I want to jog down to the river and make it my bed, a river bed. So using, a wordplay to add to the humor of the poem. Not necessarily the most original type jokes, but again, evoking a sense of coziness, I would say. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts on Ode to the Midwest by Kevin Young. Pretty solid poem, even if it does have some problems. Again, I'm not quite sure whether Kevin Young is being sarcastic with this poem, if they're being sincere. Maybe they're trying to highlight that even though it might be cozy, it's not cozy for everyone because there's people of color are in the minority, and it seems predominantly white, and doesn't create a safe environment, historically speaking. Maybe that's what he's trying to evoke, or maybe he's just eliciting stereotypes of the Midwest and asking us to laugh, which isn't necessarily complex, and you would expect better from perhaps a poet that I've been talking about on this channel. But if you have any thoughts on it, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Maybe you have a different perspective on this poem. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this poet or this poem or Poetry Thursday if they don't know about any of those things. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Midwestern travels. Farewell.